Good morning, teachers and colleagues. Today I will be presenting a long case on in yeah. She's a 21-year-old girl, resident of West Bengal, student, presented with chief complaints of fever, cough, night sweats since last 6 months, bilateral neck swellings since 5 months, progressive weakness for last 3 months, weight loss of 4 kg in last 2 months, which is unintended, intermittent generalized itching into 1 month, and joint and bone pain since last 1 month. So if you see the chief complaints, a fever and cough is there since last 6 months. It was initially was on night only, then it has progressed and started to occur in day and night both times. Occasionally, it is associated with chills. Cough is with whitish expectorant, persistent, spontaneous. It affects her sleep and activity of daily life. The neck swelling, it was first noticed by the patient on right lower side 5 months back. She then noticed similar kind of swelling in left side also around 1 month after the initial swelling. Both the swelling gradually started to increase in size, and now they have attained a size of approximate size of grape. Now swellings are not associated with any pain, redness, ulceration, or discharge. There is no history of any pain during inspiration or expiration, no history of any breathing difficulty, no history of dyspnea during lying down. There is no history of any rash or photosensitivity or joint swelling or morning stiffness. No history of early satiety or abdominal fullness. No history of any frothy urine. No previous history of recurrent infections or fever. No previous history of any blood transfusion, bleeding from any side. And there is no history of dyspnea or arm swelling. Personal history, there is no previous history of tuberculosis, diabetes, hypo or hyperthyroidism or hypertension. She is currently on no treatment, no history of alcohol or smoking. Obstetrics history, she attended MENARC at the age of 12. She is having regular menses, and last LMP is 18th September 2021. Family history, there is no family history of any malignancy. So to summarize, a 21-year-old girl, a resident of West Bengal, student presented with fever, cough, night sweats since last 6 months, and gradually increasing bilateral lower neck swelling with weight loss, intermittent itching, and bone pain. Based on this, my differential would be tuberculosis, lymphoproliferative disorder, autoimmune condition.
Rahul, can you go back to chief complaints? Yeah, so there is 6 chief complaints with which the patient presented, but I think you didn't mention about this in the history of presenting illness regarding the itching, joint pain. So as you have mentioned in the chief complaint, but it was not described in the history of presenting illness. So that is one. The way, just go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is very important that you did about each complaint and how it affected her day-to-day life, like the cough, which is affecting the sleep, activity of daily life. So these things are very important when you describe the history of presenting illness. Similarly, when you describe a pain in the joint or bone pain, how severe it was. So that you always have to correlate with the activity of daily living, whether it is affecting in their sleep also. So these things are very important. One thing I want to add is that when you present history of presenting illness, so you have written here fever and cough for 6 months and neck swelling started 5 months back. So as I can make out that fever started first and then neck swelling after 1 month. So instead of presenting like this, it is better to present. I always say that always present like a story. The way the presentation started from 6 months, like the patient started with fever, cough, then what happened, and after a month of that, the patient noticed a swelling, and that was of size of this, and within a month it increased up to size this, and then you can elaborate the negative findings like it was not associated with pain. So these negative histories should be there with each complaint, what you ruled out with each chief complaint. And you should also mention about how severe was the itching that you have described, and you have described the joint pain. What do you think about those joint pains? I can make out anything out of that joint pain unless you describe that this joint pain was not probably a joint pathology. It was part of a systemic constitutional symptom. So these things are important when you describe the chief complaint or history of presenting illness. That's from my side. Madam, if they are sick, madam, can you add? You want to add anything?
No, nothing. I just wanted to understand why tuberculosis and why autoimmune disorder with this, presentation. Why did you keep the differential of these two?
So, ma'am, fever, cough, night sweats, and a lymphadenopathy with weight loss is because of that tuberculosis on first place. And autoimmune condition because she is having fever with bone pain and some generalized some itching also.
So which autoimmune condition you are thinking of?
So, ma'am, ideally, her age is not such that the autoimmune condition will be there, but in some cases like SLE.
Why age is against her autoimmune condition?
So, ma'am,
In fact, the age is more important. Age is more favoring autoimmune condition, I would say.
yes,
She's a young patient, female, right? Yes.
yes, sir, female.
So, which autoimmune condition is common within a young female? She also has joint pains.
Yes, SLE is one thing, sir. And rheumatoid arthritis, sir.
How does rheumatoid arthritis present, Hemant? This indicates that you've neither evaluated SLE or rheumatoid arthritis. How does rheumatoid arthritis present? If you were making a differential of rheumatoid arthritis, then you should have described your joint pains better.
So, ma'am, the main diagnosis would be SLE for differential.
Why SLE? What is there here which makes it makes you think that it is SLE?
Ma'am, young age, fever, joint pain, and itching on your.
Itching is a manifestation of SLE?
No, ma'am.
And what kind of joint pains?
So, ma'am, the joint pain for this lady is basically a multiple joint pains, which includes both large and small joints.
And what
it is,
would you ask to make it that it is autoimmune disorder or not autoimmune disorder? What are those? What are the characteristics of those joint pains?
So they are usually, ma'am, migratory joint pains, and usually involves the small joints.
Anyone else wants to take up that? What are the typical features?
Morning stiffness, small joints, and migratory polyarthritis.
And why do you think itching will be there in tuberculosis? What is your explanation?
Itching is not associated, I mean, not for tuberculosis, ma'am.
So then how do you explain the bone pains, itching, etc. with tuberculosis? Your first differential is tuberculosis, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So how do you explain itching and bone pains and the kind of joint pains which you have described with tuberculosis?
Not explainable.
So whenever you put a differential, first you need to order in terms of what is the most likely cause. As I've mentioned multiple times, that it's not just for the sake of putting some differential that you have to label 3, 4, or 5 differentials. You need to put them in order of priority, which explains your symptoms best, and then give features in favor, features against. So there's no point just labeling 3 differentials and not able to explain that what are the points in favor, what are the points against. Any other differentials?
No, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead with examination.
Examination, ma'am, her performance status is 1, which is because of cough. She is conscious, oriented, cooperative. Her temperature at examination was 98.8, pulse rate 100, saturation 98%, and respiratory rate 20 per minute. No pallor, no icterus, cyanosis, or clubbing or edema. Her height was 150 centimeter, weight 55 kg. For local examination, bilateral lower cervical lymph nodes. The right side is 2 into 2 centimeter, which is single, firm, non-tender, rubbery, mobile, and it is free from overlying skin. The left one is 2 into 1.5 centimeter, which is again single, firm, non-tender, rubbery, mobile, and free from overlying skin. There is one left axillary node along the posterior axillary line, which is firm, rubbery, not clear about matted, non-matted, but it's mobile, and 1 into 1.5 centimeter. Systemic examination, ma'am, her oral cavity is normal. The chest is clear. There is no added sounds. Cardiovascular system, there is S1, S2, and there is no murmur, additional heart sounds. Per abdomen, it is soft, non-tender, and there is no organomegaly. Based on this, so I will change this preference, ma'am. First will be lymphoproliferative disorder, then tuberculosis, then autoimmune.
What are these skin findings? You said itching, no? What are these?
Yes, ma'am. So there is no exfoliation as such. There is no scratch marks. But what patient was complaining that the itching is intermittent. It sometimes comes and then goes away by itself.
And what about the joint examination?
Yeah. On joint examination, ma'am, there is no tenderness or swelling in any of the joints. There is the movement around the major joints was intact. As such, nothing to find out on joint examination. Nothing abnormal.
I think Kishore has asked what are the findings you would look for.
Given the history, no, you said the patient has cough. What is the
Sorry, sir, I can't hear you.
I think sir is not able to join. So Rahul, so you want to be anything specific about this lymphoproliferative disorder? What kind of lymphoproliferative disorder in a 21-year female with 6-month history?
Sir, Hodgkin's lymphoma would be first.
Okay, so how do you explain joint pains with bone pains? You're told, no, bone pains. How do you explain that with Hodgkin? Do you think there is any disease in the involvement of the bone, or why she's having bone pain?
Sir, as such, disease involvement is not there because on examination there is no abnormal finding in bone or bone joints. But what she was complaining is that she has intermittent pain in the joints. But at the time of examination, there was no findings.
Yeah, so we can explain this simply by saying that no, this is part of the constitutional symptoms related to the disease. May not be the direct involvement of the bone, which is unusual to have in any kind of lymphoma. No, in lymphoma per se. What lymphomas? What are the lymphomas which are common at this age, 21 year?
Sir, Hodgkin lymphoma, and the second is primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma.
Mm-hmm.
Would
Any
you
other?
make sorry.
Yes,
Sorry.
ma'am.
No. Would you make a diagnosis of primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma in the kind of presentation what you're talking about? You
No,
said
ma'am. No, ma'am.
neck nodes, axillary nodes. So then why PMBCL?
Ma'am, presentation is with cough and fever also. So most likely she is having mediastinal lymphadenopathy, mediastinal lymph nodes.
That's what I'm saying. So you are now post-examination, no? It's not that you are only relying on history. So based on your examination finding, would you put the diagnosis of primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma there?
No, ma'am. Will require a biopsy.
No, leave aside require the biopsy. I'm asking about clinical examination. What you're seeing, would you put primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma there or you would not?
No, ma'am.
So then talk about things, what are, what is feasible. So Lingaraj asked that what are the diagnosis if you're looking at 21-year-old and you're talking of lymphoproliferative disorder, give in the descending order, what would you think based on this clinical examination and history, what differential you're going to put?
Ma'am, Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Any other differential other than Hodgkin's? What about diffuse large B-cell lymphoma? Otherwise, what about lymphoblastic lymphoma? The reasons for them, reasons against them.
Ma'am, DLBCLs are usually present in old age, ma'am. This is not typical age for presentation of DLBCL.
You finished your hemat posting, no?
Yes, ma'am.
You've never seen a DLBCL in 21-year-old? Or
Ma'am,
it's not?
It can present.
We are not talking about median age of presentation. Whether DLBCL can happen. So if you look at a 21-year-old girl, you tell me in the order of, leave aside this presentation, you tell me what are the possible lymphomas which are going to be there from top to bottom. So
Ma'am, Hodgkin's lymphoma, then cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, DLBCL.
cutaneous T-cell lymphoma.
Some variants of cutaneous T-cell lymphoma can occur in early age.
So if I give you a scenario that you see 100 individuals of this age group, list the top 5 lymphomas in this age group. Tell me what you have seen in the OPDs. How many cases of cutaneous T-cell lymphoma you saw in throughout your posting?
2 only.
And how many DLBCLs did you see?
Many.
Does that give any indication? That
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, it will be Hodgkin's lymphoma, then DLBCL, and then ma'am ALCL. So, okay.
Okay. What investigations would you do?
Basic investigation will include CBC, MDC, RFT, LFT, serum electrolyte, calcium, magnesium, phosphate, ESR, LDH, viral markers, blood group and typing, and chest X-ray.
Keep giving reasons for each one of them and what would help in terms of diagnosis. Why did you ask for a CBC, MDC and the other parameter?
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, CBC would like to see lymphocytosis first, second, anemia or thrombocytopenia, MDC will also confirm the lymphocytosis. Renal function test, mainly uric acid to rule out any tumor lysis is there. Liver function test to rule out liver involvement. At present, serum electrolyte, calcium, magnesium, phosphate, again to rule out TLS. ESR and LDH can help to diagnose and to rule out, to diagnose the disease. Viral markers, blood group and typing, if it is presently or in future, if he or she requires blood transfusion, and chest X-ray because of her presentation with cough. And fever, cough and fever.
First of all, ESR, LDH are not the diagnostic parameters. Okay. So whatever you are going to do, it's only at best going to help you in risk stratification based on what the diagnosis is. So I can understand CBC and MDC to a certain extent. MDC here, you're not talking of low-grade lymphoma that you are expecting lymphocytosis, unless you are thinking in terms of an LBL with the peripheral blood spill, which practically becomes ALL. That's where the MDC is going to help. RFT I can understand, LFT I can understand. Any specific reason for asking magnesium?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And does blood group and typing going to help you with any diagnosis?
No, ma'am, it won't.
Later on, when depending on what your CBC is, so you're not taking the investigation chart. What we are trying to understand is that each investigation, what you are ordering, how it's helping you first with the diagnosis, so that then you can order the remaining investigations. Okay. I think there is a question in the chat box that what CBC findings would you see in Hodgkin's lymphoma? Your differential, one of the differential is Hodgkin's lymphoma. So what CBC findings would you see in Hodgkin's lymphoma?
So, ma'am, CBC finding can give us neutrophilic leukocytosis. It can also have, in some cases, eosinophilia, and it can have in some cases, lymphopenia.
What about the hemoglobin?
Yes, hemoglobin, it may be normal or on decreased level because of if there is a bone marrow involved.
Okay. Would there be possibility of low counts? Low WBC?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
platelet?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And why do you think that that is possible?
So marrow infiltration is one thing.
What is the other possibility?
Hypersplenism can cause decreased WBC count and platelets.
What is the other possibility, a more likely possibility with Hodgkin's lymphoma rather than hypersplenism? Have you heard of HLH?
Yes, ma'am.
Can that result in cytopenias?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Lingraj has asked how common is the marrow infiltration in Hodgkin's lymphoma?
So on diagnosis, it is around 6 to 18%, depending upon our investigation. Bone marrow, if we are doing, it is 6%. If we are doing PET-CT, is around 18%.
Yes, sir. Also, yeah, go ahead. So go ahead with your presentation. Yeah, what are the investigations you can just?
Yes, sir. So after the investigation, the lab's hemoglobin is 10.3 with an MCV of 78%, 78 femtoliter. Platelet count 288, and WBC count of 16,000 with an ANC of 13,400. And the RBC morphology suggestive of microcytosis and hypochromic. while her MDC is neutrophilic, predominantly neutrophilic, 74% neutrophils. And biochemistry, her uric acid is 4.2, create is 0.5, potassium is 3.8, and her
Class
her LDH value is 184. While serum iron is low and TIBC is also low. So it indicates iron deficiency anemia also. Next, I will be recommend for a tissue diagnosis. I will prefer a excisional subcutaneous. I will prefer a excisional supraclavicular lymph node biopsy with a histomorphology and a gene expert. So the report of the histopath is right cervical lymph node. Classical Hodgkin's lymphoma, nodular sclerosis variety, CD30 and CD15 positive. And negative for Epstein-Barr virus and CD20, CD3. Next, once the diagnosis is confirmed of Hodgkin's lymphoma, I would like to stage the condition with a PET-CT. We can see that PET-CT is showing supraclavicular lymph nodes. There is also mediastinal lymph nodes, and there is also a D2 lesion in the PET-CT, which gives us a staging of stage 4 because of bone marrow involvement also. And if we see the report, it confirms that there is supradiaphragmatic adenopathy on bilateral supraclavicular, axillary, multiple bilateral lower, multiple bilateral mediastinal, and there is a marrow lesion in D2 vertebra. Liver and spleen are unknown, and focal marrow lesion at D2. And after that, I would like to do the therapy-directed investigation would be 2D echo, ECG 2D echo, and PFT DLC. So based on this, the diagnosis would be Hodgkin's lymphoma, nodular sclerosis variety, stage 4B, with an IPS score of 4 out of 7.
Rahul, can you go back to the histopathology report?
Yes.
Yeah. So, what do you think are important points here, which says that it is Hodgkin from both from morphology and the immunohistochemistry?
So, sir, first thing is the background of the biopsy. It includes multiple inflammatory cells like lymphocytes, histiocytes, eosinophils, and large cells.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is mononuclear, binuclear, and multinuclear breath-like giant cells.
So, out of all these, which are the malignant cells here? All
Sir, these mononuclear, binuclear, and multinuclear cells. Most likely, these are Reed-Steinberg cells.
Okay, so these are large cells, and these are the abnormal cells, and all these other cells which are there in this biopsy are the inflammatory milieu of the disease. Okay, so then, so in this kind of morphology, what do you think are the possible differentials?
So, sir, mononuclear Reed-Steinberg cell is something which is mostly seen with nodular sclerosis variety of Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Mm-hmm.
And then to confirm this, the CD30 and CD15 also positive, which is seen with Hodgkin's lymphoma classical variety.
Okay, so CD30 is positive. I would say CD30 is also positive in T cell lymphomas also, no? Is it very specific for Hodgkin that CD30 is positive, then it is Hodgkin?
So it is seen in 100% cases of Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Okay, that's good. So it has very high sensitivity. So when you have CD30 negative on the large cells, it is unlikely to be Hodgkin. Okay, but does it have that much of specificity that it is CD30 is positive, then it is Hodgkin? Any other lymphomas have CD30 positivity apart from Hodgkin? So T cell lymphomas has Hodgkin positivity of CD30.
Sir, ALCL can have CD30 positivity.
Yes, so ALCLs can have CD30 positivity. So CD30 is not very specific for Hodgkin, but it is very, very sensitive for Hodgkin. So that means the sensitivity, as you said, is almost 100%. Okay, so and what are the other markers which are helpful here? So CD30 is not giving you the B cell lineage, like it is also present in T cells.
Sorry.
Yeah. So what are the other markers that helped you that it is a B cell malignancy or B cell lineage? PAX5. Okay.
PAX,
So
sir.
PAX5
Yes, sir.
is something which is weak, and it is classically weak only in Hodgkin. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So it is negative for 20. Is it okay? You find any CD20 positivity in Hodgkin?
CD20 positivity can be seen, sir, in 20 to 30% cases, but it is not seen in all cases.
Yes, CD20 positivity can be seen with Hodgkin's, but they are not like classical diffuse positivity of large B cell lymphomas. It has heterogeneity and less intense. Okay, so here EBV LMP is negative. So you said it is classical. So what is significance of EBV LMP here?
Sir, Hodgkin lymphoma in around 50% cases can be associated with Epstein-Barr virus, but it is not seen in 100% cases. Again.
So what is the significance of EBV LMP in classical Hodgkin?
So, sir, it is mainly associated with fixed cellular.
Okay, so it is positive in many. Okay, not 50. So what we do is an IHC. Okay, so there is something called FIS. No,
Feverish, yes, sir.
Yeah. So what we don't do often. So in that case, it will be positive in many. Okay, if you do the FIS. So when you say classical Hodgkin, is there anything other type of Hodgkin which is not classical?
Yes, sir. NLPLH is one variety which is seen around 5 to 10%, which is not classical Hodgkin.
So nodular predominant. Any difference from classical Hodgkin from NLPHL? What are the differences?
Sir, on IHC, they are usually CD45 positive, CD15, CD30 negative.
And their EBV LMP?
So they are usually EBV negative, sir.
Yeah. So Madam has asked, Vanita Madam, what are the basic minimum IC markers needed to diagnose Hodgkin?
So basically we need, sir, CD15, CD30, CD45. There are three.
So what is CD45?
CD45 is, sir, pan B cell markers.
LCA. Okay. So what will be CD45 in Hodgkin?
LCA. Sorry, sir.
What will be CD45 in Hodgkin?
It is negative, sir.
Okay.
Classical variant, it is negative.
So you need LCA. One. Out of 30 and 15, which is most important?
30, sir.
30. So you need 30. So that is next most important after LCA. You need PAX5 and CD15. Okay. So PAX5, you need to have some marker which can denote that it is a B cell disease. So PAX5 is commonly that we use. And EBB to understand whether it is a classical Hodgkin or an NLPHL. Okay. So I think that is the basic marker you need. You need CD20 to be done in Hodgkin's.
Sir,
CD20.
No, sir.
Needed. Yeah, unless if you are suspecting a classical Hodgkin, you don't need to do CD20 because we don't give CD20 directed therapies also in Hodgkin. There is no benefit. So CD3 you may not. So if you ask, basic minimum is 30, 15, EBB, LMP, and PAX.
Rahul, is there any other lymphoma which has such a microenvironment, polymorphous?
Sorry, sir.
What sir is asking is that you told no morphology where there is so polymorphous microenvironment where you got very few the malignant cells and a lot of polymorphous background. So is there any other malignancy which looks like this morphology? Rahul, can you do you understand the question, right?
No, sir.
So the question is so the morphology that is described here, where there are a lot
Yes.
of the microenvironment is polymorphic. There are a lot of lymphoid population which is comprising of a lot of different kinds of cells. So is there any other lymphoma where you find such background? If you see lymphoma, say if you see the large B cell lymphomas, you'll find seeds of malignant cells. You're not going to see any normal lymphocyte, histiocyte, eosinophils. You'll see, if you see the diffuse large B cells, a lot of large cells and full of large B cells in the morphology. So here we are seeing a lot of polymorphous background with very few malignant cells like large cells. So is there any other lymphoma apart from Hodgkin which will look like this?
This gray zone lymphoma, primary mediastinal B cell lymphoma, something.
Okay, anything else? So primary mediastinal B cell lymphoma also you can have backgrounds. Have you heard of the term T cell rich B cell lymphoma?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what will you find there? So there also we'll find a lot of background, polymorphous background with large B cells. But of course, the ISCs, the immunohistochemistry will be different there. You'll have strong CD20 positivity, CD30 will be negative, and EBB LMP virus is negative. Have you heard of the entity called EBB associated or EBB positive DLB cells? EBB associated, am I audible, Rahul?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so EBB associated lymphomas.
Yes, sir.
What are the EBB associated lymphomas?
Burkitt lymphoma, sir.
But this is not the morphology, right? So what are the lymphomas which are associated EVB and also this kind of picture? So there is something called EBB associated DLBCLs, which can have this kind of morphology, and it can be confused with Hodgkin. And as Madam has also mentioned about AITL, I told you CD30 positivity also seen in T cell lymphomas, and AITL is one where you may find this kind of background of lot of polymorphous background with very few large malignant cells, and they will be CD30 positive. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Madam, I think we should move ahead. Anybody else has any questions?
I think Sumit has asked a question in the chat that how do you say that marrow is involved on PET scan?
Ma'am, there will be a focal or multifocal involvement. Marrow uptakes will be there on the marrow. Hello?
Yes, Rahul, you are correct. So is the diffuse uptake on PET scan suggestive of bone marrow involvement?
No, sir. Diffuse homogeneous uptake is not suggested.
Right. So if there's a focal uptake, which is especially the uptake is more than the liver, and there is no alternative etiology to explain that focal uptake.
Yes, sir.
For example, if a patient has a focus of osteomyelitis in one bone, and he's only showing that focal uptake, then that is not explained by lymphoma. That is why.
Yes.
So as Sumit mentioned, when you see a diffuse uptake in patient with a known diagnosis of Hodgkin's lymphoma, it's very less likely that it is because of the disease itself. It's more likely the paraneoplastic, manifestation where in the peripheral blood you see neutrophilic leukocytosis. So it's more like GCSF-induced marrow stimulation. Whereas if you see that diffuse uptake in some of the other lymphomas, especially if you're talking in terms of follicular lymphoma or other lymphomas, it may be due to disease. So in Hodgkin's, it's focal involvement, which could be a single site or multiple sites. But in some other lymphomas, if you see, especially the follicular and other low-grade lymphoma, if you see diffuse low-grade uptake, that can be because of the disease involvement. I think Vanita has asked, would you do a marrow as part of staging workup?
No, ma'am.
So which are the situation in Hodgkin's lymphoma where you would consider doing a marrow?
So, ma'am, if the PET is showing PET is inconclusive for bone marrow involvement, but there is unexplained cytopenias. This is one indication where we do bone marrow.
So if you have unexplained cytopenias, meaning there is no evidence of HLH, there is no evidence of marrow involvement on PET scan, that's the only situation where you may do a marrow examination and to rule out what is the reason for this unexplained cytopenias. But otherwise, PET CT is good enough. Yeah, Lingraj, continue. We can continue.
Yeah, please proceed, Rahul. You have very less time. We can discuss quickly the management. So you have to go to the next case.
So, sir, for management, I would like to go for a PET-based therapy where I will give 2 cycles of ABVD.
No, Rahul, just how will you counsel this patient? She is advanced Hodgkin, IPS 4/7. So what is the expected outcome with this patient with whatever treatment you give?
So, based on IPS score, sir, the 5-year of
the high risk or low risk disease based on IPS?
Sir, it's a intermediate risk, sir. 5 to 7 is high risk. Hello?
Yes.
Sir? So based on IPS score, sir.
So anything more than 3 is high. Okay. So this is an high risk disease. Okay. So how will you counsel this patient?
So, sir, based on this, the 5-year chances of freedom from progression and overall survival, if we see, it will be somewhere around 50%. The 5-year progression, 5-year overall survival.
Not overall survival. Okay, the overall survival will be much more than that. So it is always an event-free survival. Okay, chalo, go ahead.
So for treatment,
yes,
I would like to use I would give 2 cycles of ABVD followed by a PET scan after 2 cycles, and based on the PET scan, if it is negative PET scan, means Duvall score 1 to 3, would like to give continue 4 cycles AVD and to complete the treatment.
So what are the way you can treat this patient? So when you say no, so treatment for this patient, it can be done in 3 different ways. One is starting with AVVD.
Yes,
the other option is starting with escalated and use of brentuximab. So when you say the treatment for a given patient, we should tell what are the options, and then we can discuss with the patient that the way you want to treat. Okay, so one approach is using an AVVD first, and then looking at a 2-cycle interim PET, and depending on the response, de-escalating to AVD, that is omitting bleomycin. That's the way the Rathel group has done. The other group, the other approach is to start with accelerated BACOP. Yeah, so as the patient has a high risk disease, after 2 cycles, then de-escalating to AVVD or continuing to more BACOP. The third approach is using brentuximab upfront with AVD, or omitting bleomycin and replacing with brentuximab. So these are the 3 approaches how we are going to treat this patient. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So yes, madam has asked a very, very valid point that you missed about sperm banking. So but this patient was a female. So in female, anything else? Any options you have in female for fertility preservation? And what is the rate of infertility with AVVD and BACOP? That's very important in young patients. Okay.
Yes, sir. Sir, with AVVD, there is the risk of infertility is very low. Almost all the patients will recover after completion of therapy within few months or years.
That means you don't need sperm cryopreservation. Then semen cryopreservation, you don't need that, right? If it is for everybody, you need or you don't need?
Sir, but few cases, around 4 to 6% patients may not recover from this infertility. So we need a cryopreservation for those.
Yeah. So when you say almost all, then I will assume you don't need that, right? So there is chances of infertility in these patients, but it is in the tune of 10%, not more than that. 5 to 10%, if you say there is a range. In BACOP, what is the risk of infertility?
Sir, for BCOP, the risk of infertility is is high, very high, and basically the risk of infertility remains. I mean, it depends on the age of the patient also. The patient with lower than 30 years, they usually recover, but the infertility rate is around 68 to 80% rates. But the female who have age less than 30 years, they may recover, but the female with age more than 30 years, their recovery chances are very less. So we need definite cryopreservation for those for patients who are planned for BCOP.
So, madam, anything else to discuss on treatment? So, I think it's already 9:22. We have to discuss one more.
We can move on to the next one.
Who is going to present next?
Sir, I am presenting. Sir,
Hemant.
Hemant. Sir. I'm Hemant, sir.
Yes. So, Hemant, be quick, and I think it's the short case. So, just quickly go to the summary of the case summary, and then you can discuss from there.
Sir, she's 38-year-old female presented with chief complaints of swelling over left side of the neck of 6 months duration and abdominal pain of 2 months duration. The negative history to mention, she has no history of fever, no history of night sweats, no history of ulceration in the mouth, or she has no dysphagia or hoarseness of voice. She has no vomiting or altered bowel habits. On general examination, patient was conscious, coherent, oriented, and ECG performance status was 1, moderately built and nourished. Patient has pallor, there is no icterus, cyanosis, clubbing, and pedal edema. She is vitally stable. On lymph node examination, conglomerate lymph node mass of approximately 3 by 4 centimeter in right level 2 and 5. It was formed to hard in consistency, fixed to underlying structures, and the skin over the swelling is pinchable, and there was no ulceration. It is associated with pain on deep palpation, and another lymph node in the left axilla is around 2 by 1 centimeter, formed to hard in consistency, non-tender, mobile. So on systemic examination, oral cavity and oropharynx, no abnormality detected. Chest examination was normal. Bilateral breast examination was within normal limits. CVS examination S1, S2 had, and there were no murmurs. Her abdomen was soft, tender on deep palpation, and splenomegaly, massive splenomegaly is there with the spleen palpable approximately 14 centimeters below left costal margin. It is crossing the midline, and inferiorly it is extending up to the umbilicus. And CNS involvement, no focal neurological detection. So she is 38-year-old female with good performance status with 6 months history of cervical and axillary lymphadenopathy and 2 months history of splenomegaly. My first differential would be low-grade lymphoma.
Which particular subtypes of low-grade lymphomas you're considering?
So it might be follicular or CLL, SLL.
Okay. Points for and against. So which is more likely between follicular and CLL? If you have to pick one, which is more likely?
Follicular.
What is against CLL? Odd point for a CLL presentation.
Relatively acute presentation.
No, I mean 6 months history is okay.
Yes.
You would expect a generalized neuropathy, but then that is true also.
Age is one.
Yeah. Age is in 38 is a little unusual, but yeah, you can have at 38 also CLL. Any other low-grade lymphoma which can present like this besides follicular and CLL?
Sir, massive splenomegaly may be present in splenic marginal zone.
Yeah, what is odd for a splenic marginal zone lymphoma?
Generalized lymphadenopathy is not so common.
Yeah, but then you can have a nodal marginal zone lymphoma which can have lymphadenopathy and splenomegaly. But for a SMZL, primarily it is a disease with presence with splenomegaly. So you don't expect a peripheral adenopathy. So that's the third thing. What is the fourth problem which can present like this? Can a mantle cell lymphoma present like this?
Yes, sir.
Can present.
It can present.
Mantle cell. So another thing you should consider. So massive splenomegaly with adenopathy. The possibility is follicular mantle cell lymphoma, CLL. Okay.
Yes.
And then some other rarer lymphomas which can present like this. For example, a Waldenstrom's can present like this with splenomegaly and adenopathy.
Yes.
Okay. So what investigation you want to do? Quickly tell the specific investigations.
Sir, CBC.
Hemant, there is a question from ma'am. How do you explain hard lymph nodes which is fixed to the underlying structure, and why is this not a classical Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Sir, in this, in Hodgkin's lymphoma, splenomegaly is not so common.
Can be. You cannot discount the possibility of a Hodgkin's.
Sir.
This presentation could very well even fit into a Hodgkin's lymphoma. The massive splenomegaly are unusual, but you cannot say that you will not consider the possibility of a Hodgkin's.
Yes.
And how do you explain the hard lymph node with that is fixed to the underlying structures?
Sir, it can be present in classic Hodgkin's lymphoma. Can be present around 30% of the.
No, I don't know. I don't think whether you got my question. So, madam is asking how do you explain the hard lymph nodes fixed to the underlying structure?
Sir, lymph nodes are not mobile. Not mobile over the. Sir, it's fixed.
This is what my question is, Hemant. How do you explain a lymph node in either you're talking about low-grade lymphoma, no?
Yes.
So low-grade lymphoma, lymph node being fixed to the underlying structure and being hard in consistency.
Maybe.
लो ग्रेड में ने यानी लिम्फ नोड्स फिक्स थोड़ी હોય ફિક્સ માટે એક્સ્ટ્રા નોડલ એક્સટેન્શન હોય ને તો હોજકિન્સ માં એવું થોડી થાય
કોઈ બી લિમ્ફોમા
હાર્ડ નું તો ખબર નથી હાર્ડ તો એટલે હાર્ડ ના હોય એમ પણ હવે એક
હા તો બોલ
You have any explanation, Hemant? Devanshi was giving you some explanations.
Not sure.
Not sure. So it's very unlikely. See, when you say that the lymph node is fixed to underlying structure, meaning there is extracapsular extension or there is so much of fibrosis around the node that it has become fixed. It's a very unusual feature if you're talking in terms of a low-grade lymphoma, or for that matter, all lymphomas, except you can see this kind of a presentation in classical Hodgkin's lymphoma, where you have a lot of sclerosis inside the node, and therefore you may feel it hard. And even then, finding it to be fixed to underlying structure is something which is rare, because you don't see extracapsular extension there, which results in this kind of picture. So when the lymph node is large in size, you may find that it's relatively immobile. You're not able to, get that mobility which you typically want to see. So in that case, you should just say that I can't comment on mobility because the lymph node is large enough.
Yes,
However, that's not the case here because it's just 3 into 4 centimeter size node. So I'm not sure why you're saying that it is fixed to underlying structure, unless it's a deep-seated node where you won't be able to even assess mobility. So don't comment. The
Yes,
second point is all your clinical examination, you've mentioned tender on deep palpation. Huh?
yes.
Either you are pressing too hard, because we don't get this tenderness in any lymphomas when we examine. The tenderness means that the node has rapidly increased in size and there is capsular stretching, and same is true for splenomegaly. And if you're giving a 6 months history and there is tenderness on examination, then I would say that be gentle with the patient. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. Understood. So,
Continue with the investigations. So our differential is lymphoma, and based on your presentation, I'm not very convinced that it is going to be low-grade lymphoma. Both the age and the kind of lymphadenopathy is something which is unusual. But having said that, massive splenomegaly goes against classical Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's not a typical presentation. So we
Yes.
need to look at the investigation and see what possibilities are there.
Yes, ma'am. See, your hemoglobin was 6.7, TLC was 15,800, and ANC 11,900, and platelets was 75,000. RFT uric acid is slightly elevated. LFT is within normal limits, and LDH is 215. Serum electrolytes were within normal limits. Phosphorus is slightly elevated. Viral markers were non-reactive, and the coagulation profile was within. So her peripheral blood smear show atypical lymphocytes of 85%, and peripheral smear flow cytometry show CD10 variable, CD20 is bright, CD5 is negative, and BCL2 is moderately positive. And based
Does
on
this peripheral smear lymphocytosis matches with your CBC and differential what you were talking, CBC what you were talking about? There were 11,500 neutrophils out of 15,600 WBC.
yes, ma'am, it is
So-
not matching. It should be abnormal lymphocytosis. But here,
Okay, go to the next one. So just make sure when you are putting up some values, they should be consistent with each other.
yes, ma'am. So flow cytometry consistent with the follicular lymphoma, and cytogenetics show BCL6 translocation in 75% cells, and translocation 14, 18, 90% of the cells. It is consistent with the follicular lymph. So I would like to stage the disease. Patient has multiple cervical lymph nodes of largest 2.7 centimeters, bilateral axillary mediastinal lymph nodes, abdominal lymph nodes, and pelvic lymph nodes, and there is diffuse FDG uptake in enlarged spleen. So basically, she has a supra and infradiaphragmatic lymphadenopathy and massive splenomegaly PET CT. So cervical lymph node biopsy show atypical follicles predominantly composed of small to intermediate sized lymphoid cells. On IHC, they are positive for CD20 and CD10, and weak positive for BCL2. And the MIB index was 25 to 30%. It is consistent with follicular lymphoma grade 2. So it is follicular lymphoma grade 2 and stage 3.
Why stage 3?
The supra and infra diaphragmatic lymphadenopathy.
And how would you account for peripheral blood spill? You have documented on flow cytometry follicular lymphoma. How do you account that? Where those cells come from?
CD10 is positive, CD5 is negative, and BCL2 is moderate positive.
You're understanding my question, no?
Yes.
So in a patient where you have diagnosed follicular lymphoma on peripheral blood, can the stage be stage 3?
No.
Sorry?
No, ma'am.
So what's the stage? Am I audible, Hemant?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So what's the stage? It's such a difficult question to answer.
It's stage 3.
Huh? Follicular lymphoma with peripheral blood involvement, where you are seeing some 85% atypical lymphocyte out of whatever 15,000 TLC.
Stage 4.
So what is the confusion?
No, ma'am. Sorry. Stage 4.
How do you select the lymph? So in this patient, you've already got a diagnosis of follicular lymphoma. One, what was the need for lymph node biopsy, and how do you select lymph node, which lymph node to biopsy?
The most accessible site we'll select.
My question is, here you already have a
Supraclass.
diagnosis of follicular lymphoma. Is there a need for lymph node biopsy? First answer that. If yes, then how would you select the lymph node, which lymph node you want to biopsy?
There is no need for peripheral blood flow is needed, and there is no exact indication for biopsy. Peripheral blood is confirmative of all.
So with this, you can just go ahead and start treatment, correct? So peripheral blood only tells you what's the diagnosis, and for follicular lymphoma, because you need to decide subsequent treatment, you need to understand the grading.
Yes, ma'am.
Peripheral blood can't tell you because the grading is dependent on the node biopsy. Yeah,
Yes,
and that too on an incisional or an excisional node biopsy, not on core needle biopsy. It's difficult to make a diagnosis of grading on a core needle biopsy. So the answer
Yes,
is yes, you need a node biopsy. Now the next question is, how do you decide which node to biopsy?
She has a long history of cervical lymphadenopathy, and it is the most accessible site. And based on the
So the other worry in low-grade lymphoma is the possibility of transformation. So you want to pick up what is the highest grade or if there is a transformation. So PET to a great extent can give you an idea that which node to biopsy. So if
Yes.
you see a discordant SUV between different nodes, then the highest SUV node with the highest SUV should be considered for biopsy. There's no SUV cutoff, but it's more discordant SUV that if you see at other places, it's a low grade uptake, and at one place you see a high grade uptake, then that's a preferred node to biopsy. Unless that node is like lying close to the vessel and you can't do a biopsy, that's another story, but otherwise that's a node to biopsy.
yes, ma'am. Understood.
Go ahead.
So she's follicular lymphoma and grade 2 and stage 4. So I divide the treatment based on whether patient is symptomatic or non-symptomatic, and depending on the disease burden. In this patient, patient has massive splenomegaly. That's one indication to start treatment in this patient.
Any
So,
other symptoms she had?
She had abdominal pain because of this dragging sensation because of massive splenomegaly.
No other constitutional symptoms.
No.
So you can summarize quickly what are the indications for treatment in follicular lymphoma?
Yes, ma'am. Nodal or extranodal swelling more than 7 centimeters. Nodal regions with three nodal regions, 3 or more nodal regions with more than 3 centimeter lymph node. Elevated LDH. There are cytopenias like HB less than 10, platelet count less than 1 lakh, or ANC less than 1.5. Or if there are any serous effusions,
You've mentioned fever, weight loss.
Constitutional symptoms.
Constitutional symptoms, what exactly constitutional symptoms are we
Fever.
talking about?
Fever, weight loss,
And you know what we mean by what fever and what is
Yes.
weight loss here and what is night sweats. You
Yes.
are clear on those definitions, okay?
Yes.
Any other organ involvement? So if somebody has lytic bone lesions, lung involvement, would that be an indication or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If patient has a serous like pleural effusion.
Pleural
Serous
effusion and lung involvement are two different things. Okay. So this is follicular grade 2, stage 4, symptomatic. How would you manage?
Ma'am, I would like to start her on chemotherapy, preferably with bendamustine and rituximab.
Advantage of
Yes,
bendamustine over other regimens?
Over R-CHOP, bendamustine rituximab has PFS benefit, and it has significantly less side effects compared to R-CHOP.
Okay. And what's the approximate PFS benefit you are looking at?
Approximately 10%. Approximately 8 to 10% of PFS benefit at 5 years.
What was the median PFS with R-CHOP versus bendamustine rituximab? What was the median PFS?
5-year median PFS of around 40% with R-CHOP and is around 50% with bendamustine and rituximab.
Go back and read the trial, which has led to the preference of everyone selecting bendamustine rituximab over R-CHOP, and that's an important study. So make sure that you read it and you know exactly what is the difference in terms of response rates, the complete response rates, PFS, and the overall survival, whether there is any difference at the last follow-up. Okay.
Yes.
Any other? So after you give bendamustine rituximab, what would you do?
You done observation.
Would you try and assess response anyway?
No, ma'am. In follicular lymphoma, after 6 cycles of bendamustine rituximab, we usually don't do response scan.
Would you assess response anytime or you won't assess response anytime? Hemant,
Clinical
am I
exam.
audible? Would
Yes,
you
ma'am.
assess response anytime or you won't assess response anytime?
I'll assess the response.
So when would you assess the response?
On first after 3 months, when it is clinical examination and patient symptoms, but there is no need of imaging for response assessment.
So you won't assess any response. You'll start bendamustine rituximab, you will continue and complete 6 cycles, and you won't do anything.
Usually response scan we won't do, ma'am, but
Why?
clinical examination.
Where have you seen that? That we don't assess response, and what's the implication of response here? So if somebody on interim scan shows partial response or progressive disease, what would you do?
Patient has partial response, we will continue total 6 cycles of.
Yeah.
We'll give
What's
total
the
6 cycles.
implication of it? So when you start therapy, you counsel a patient in the beginning, no? That what do you expect with this treatment? Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you re-counsel them at the end of therapy or at the middle of therapy that where they are and how they are going to fare.
Yes, ma'am.
So how all this is guided by your scans? please go back and read. And I'm not sure whether you have given any bendamustine rituximab in the OPD. So go back and read what are the possible side effects. If you find somebody in partial response at the end of 4 cycles of chemotherapy, what is the implication? People who have achieved PR, what's the chance of them progressing within first 2 years versus those who did not? And if somebody progresses within first 2 years, what category of follicular lymphoma they come in, and what is the management? So make sure you read all that. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Lingraj, anything you have, or Hasmukh, or anyone? Otherwise, I think we can finish this case.
I think we'll move to the next, ma'am. I think the report interpretation, RQPCR report. Hasmukh sir, you have anything to add? Jayashree, as
No. About the lab interpretation.
Okay, sir. Monica will present, right? Monica?
Yes, sir.
Can you share your screen? Just a minute. Okay, I'll share. Is it visible? Yeah, Monica, can you see the screen? Monica, can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So I think we have to be very quick here. So this is the history of the patient. So this patient is a 25-year-old male diagnosed as CML in the chronic phase, and this is his first report of the qPCR. Can you interpret this report?
Yes. The patient is stressed.
Monica, your voice is breaking.
Patient is tested positive for BCR-ABL P210 transcript, which is the molecular result of T922 translocation. The transcript type is E14A2, which is a major BCR-ABL fusion transcript.
Okay. Any other transcript type you are aware of apart from P210?
Yes. P190 and P230.
Okay. Okay. This patient was started on imatinib from 400 from February 2015, and at 3-month time point, he attained a complete hematological response. So this is the qPCR at 3 months. Okay. Can you interpret this report? Monica?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
This 38% is positive.
Yeah. So how do you interpret this? So first thing, what will you see? So you see here, methodology. Then they have something called sample type, and then how
First we see ABL copy numbers as a control, which will give an idea about sample integrity. Ideally, ABL copy number should be more than 10,000. It indicates that sample integrity is.
Okay.
And
So
we have to see.
just a minute. The sample integrity is not from the ABL copy. The sample integrity is from the RN number. This RN integrity number is there, no? Sample type. You can see here it is written RN integrity number. What is that?
They will separate RNA from the given sample.
So what it says, what is the significance of that number? So this is something called RNA integrity number, which says about the quality of RNA. Okay, when you analyze any PCR and you have sent a sample, so many a times it may so happen that sample was stored for long, it was sent to other center and there was a delay. So there will be some loss and compromise in the quality of RNA. So that's why they give this number to say that the RNA quality is good, and 10 is the accepted number for this report to interpret or to go ahead for the analysis. Okay, so then you say about ABL copy number. What is the significance of ABL copy number?
It's used as a control, and to calculate normalized copy numbers, we need ABL copy number as a denominator.
Yes. So when you amplify any kind of any gene, so you need a control to say that what is the absolute copy in that particular sample. So when you amplify, of course, when you have to amplify to detect it in RQ-PCR, but when you amplify it to know what was the exact quantity, you need a control gene, and that is ABL. Any other gene that is used apart from ABL in CML? Any other gene you can use apart from ABL?
No.
Anyone else? Any other control gene that can be used for doing RQ-PCR analysis? Okay, fine. So read about it. So what is this number? International Scale Conversion Factor 1.13. What is this?
This is to decrease the lab-to-lab variation, as different labs use different reagents and kits.
Yes. So now the report is 38. Okay, this is the report that you have to interpret. This is 38%. So this is your 3 months. What will you do? What is your plan for this patient? He is 25-year-old. Yes.
Yes.
Is it a good response?
Is
it a bad response, or it is a warning? What it is?
Failure of treatment, so we have to change treatment.
Okay. This is based on what recommendation that you have to change the treatment?
If at 3-month interval, if it is more than 10%, within 1 to 3 months, if it is more than 10%, it is indicative of failure.
Okay. So before interpreting this, anything you want to ask to the patient?
Adherence of
Yes, compliance. That's most important. So whenever you see these kinds of report, when the RQ-PCR is high, we have to first ask whether the patient is compliant. Anytime he missed a treatment. So in that case, it will be high. So if you see the recent ELN, you have to do one more qPCR in a month's time, and if it is still high, then you can change the therapy to second generation TKI. This is at the so that this patient was continued on imatinib 400 milligram because the second generation TKI was not feasible at that time, and now this patient has completed 1 year of treatment. So how do you interpret this?
After 1 year, optimal response should be less than 0.1.
What is 0.01?
0.1 is major molecular response.
Mm-hmm.
It should be attained within 12 months. Here, if it is more than 1%, it is indicative of failure.
So here, what is the response here?
It is 0.3.
So is this patient is in cytogenetic response, complete cytogenetic response? Do you think this patient has attained complete cytogenetic response? Can you somehow surrogate based on the molecular report about the cytogenetic response?
No.
No. Okay. Anyone else want to take this question? Hemant or Rahul? So 1% or more is somehow is surrogate of complete cytogenetic response. If it is less than 1% in the RQ-PCR, the patient have attained cytogenetic response. But for, as you said, for major molecular response, it has to be less than 0.1 or 3 log reduction from the baseline. Okay. So what will you do at this point? Will you change treatment?
Yes. Change treatment.
Okay, so this doesn't come under failure. So any patient at the end of 1 year, if the patient has not attained cytogenetic response, that's a failure. But this patient has attained a cytogenetic response, but he has not attained a major molecular response. So the option is to wait and see whether he attains in the next follow. Now, this comes under warning. It's not a failure. Okay. I think anything else to add? I think it's already 10 o'clock. So, Madam Hasmukh sir, I think there is second report, but I think in the interest of time, you can't continue. Already.
No, I don't have anything, Ligraj.
Hasmukh sir. Anybody has any? Yeah.
Nothing from that.
Okay. So I think we can close here. Thank you all. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Rahul. Hemant. Thank you.